Hello folks, my name is Christopher Moyer and I'll be your trainer today for the training known as child development. Now, I'm going to ask you a tough question, so be prepared. How many of you were children before? Just raise your hand. Okay, most of you have been children, so that means you are fully equipped to understand, appreciate, and lead this class with knowledge and be trained in what we call child development. So we're going to start with the eternal argument of nature versus nurture. Anybody ever hear that? Nature versus nurture? How controversial can it get? I mean, think about it. We say, oh, little Johnny's a product of his environment. But at the same time, we have kids that are like, well, he rose above his circumstances, or she chose not to follow in the footsteps of so-and-so. Boy, it's confusing, isn't it? So, nature versus nurture. So, nature refers to the range of traits, capacities, and limitations that each person inherits genetically from his or her parents at the moment of conception. Pretty early on, I guess. Body type, eye color, and inherited diseases are obvious examples. Nature also includes a host of intellectual and personality characteristics. So, personality characteristics, I unfortunately inherited a lot of my dad's side of the family. They're talkers. Endless talkers. My mother's side, a little more reserved, but my grandpa liked to play jokes and tell stories, so I guess I got it from both angles. When it comes to, my hair color and all of that, both sides had brown hair, although there was a generation of gingers, so I skipped that one. Nothing against them, they were good people. Couldn't go out in the sun for the life of them, but it was all right. And then brown eyes. A lot of us had brown eyes. So you think about it, that's what you get from nature. You get your parents, you get your intellectual capabilities or limitations. I've seen generations and generations of people they go on to be doctors, and I've worked with families who, mother and child have the same maybe learning support teacher. And the teacher was well equipped to work with this family. So it doesn't make you a bad person. It's what you are born with. And that's really hard to control. So other personality characteristics you might inherit are abilities with numbers. I did not inherit that. My grandpa and my uncle are both chemists. I can't do an equation for the life of me, and I have to use my fingers to add and subtract. Okay, that's an exaggeration. And a joke, folks. Oh, that one fell flat. So, tendency to depression and sociability, believe it or not, they can be influenced by your nature. He's just like his dad. He's moody, just like his dad. Or that's that whole side of the family. They're all goofballs. Or we've all heard that talk. That's the nature. Nurture refers to all the environmental influences that come into play after conception, beginning with the mother's health during pregnancy and including all the individual's experiences with the outside world in the family, school, community, and the culture at large. So, I work with the occasional teen mom. I work with teens who are pregnant. And I am very insistent that they are mindful as to who they associate themselves with whilst they are pregnant. Because, though the baby is in utero, there's still influences that can occur, whether it's, say, the mother becomes very stressed out. Say, the mother gets put in a dangerous situation, you have all those hormones flowing due to stress. It'll be very bad for the baby. There could be trauma occurring before the baby's even born, which really sets that kid up for a rough time of things. I mean, let's face it. So, that's one thing. Also, the world we live in, yes, we have abundant food, but may not be able to buy it. So another part of nurture would be, exposure to good food and medical care, clean water. Well, what if you're living on the streets? How do you get good food then? Or what if you're living in a homeless shelter? Or your family doesn't know to keep, things clean. That can all influence, the development of a child. And the culture at large. If you were cast out of your family or said, you have a kid out of wedlock, you must leave. That could be bad. It could be bad for the mother and the child, but especially the child. So The controversy about nature and nurture has taken many names, among them heredity versus environment and maturation versus learning. I don't know which one I like better. I think they all sort of work, right? Maturation versus learning. Oh, we learn as we go, don't we? But we also have some stuff that we already sort of know too. So it's very fascinating. So how much of any characteristic, behavior, or pattern of development is determined by genetic influences, and how much is the result of the myriad experiences that occur after conception? So think about it. How much have you guys picked up since you were born? Now, I'm 39 years old. I've been around the block, so to say. Not in a bad way, but, you know. We learn things as we go along, right? And we pick up new skills. I learned that you don't put a fireplace poker in the sink. You don't do it. You leave that for the experts, especially when your dad's on midnight shift and he's already in a mood. And it's 10 minutes before he's got to leave. You know, you learn not to touch the hot oven, right? The cat's fur is standing up straight and it's hissing. You don't put your hand in to pedal mittens. You let mittens deal with its issues and run away. You know, at the same time, you know, I wonder how much or how many characteristics I was born with. You know, how many can remember back when they were real little? Apparently I had a big mouth back then too. I like to ask a lot of questions, mostly at the worst possible times. Anybody remember doing that? Now that's one trait that I have curbed in myself, using myself as an example. But with the kids that you will get, the nature versus nurture argument becomes 10 times more fascinating. Where did you learn this? Where did you pick up this behavior? How did you become this person? Case in point, and this is a fun one, not at all scary. I had a teenager. Every time he'd sit down, he'd go, oh, oh. Every time he'd stand up, he'd go, oh, oh. And the foster parents got really worried. And they said to him, why do you do that every time you sit up and stand up and sit down? You know what the kid said? Well, I thought that's how people do it. So he lived with his elderly grandparents, and they both had stiff backs. Every time he'd sit down and stand up, he would mimic what they did because he thought that's how it was done. Think about it. Something that small. How many people have spaghetti on Sunday? Now, this is a cultural thing. No? So my cousin Tony, his family, every Sunday, they lived in a town called Bradenville, had a large Italian-American population. Every Sunday, all the families had spaghetti. Then he went to his friends who were from outside of Bradenville, and they had chicken. And he's like, what's this? Chicken on a Sunday? This is weird. And then he went to another friend's, and they had something different. And then all of a sudden he realized, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's just my family that has the spaghetti on Sundays. So it was something new that he encountered. It was something new that he learned through experiencing. He was used to having the spaghetti on Sundays. Other people don't have it, and that's novel. So, but all developmentalists agree that at every point, the interaction between nature and nurture is a crucial influence on any particular aspect of development. So, you know, you are either going to get pushed ahead by what you've encountered or what you were born with, or it's going to hold you back, right? I mean, let's face it. We are not perfect. We are not 100% adaptable to everything. There will be some things that delay us or make things more challenging. But I mean, that's why we learn to overcome. And that's what we teach our foster kids too. You know, that you can overcome, that this doesn't have to be the limit of how far you will go. Instead, it could be a stepping stone, you know. And I will be picking on you guys in the back here, you know, because a couple of my favorites. So, any questions so far about nature versus nurture? No? Okay, we'll keep going here. You know, there's some policymakers who see the genetic link between biological parent and offspring as the most important factor in children's development, and they tend to believe that maltreated children should stay with their biological parents in all but the most damaging circumstances, and that when they are removed from homes, the foster care should be temporary and with close relatives. On the contrary, there's folks who believe that nurture is a stronger force in a child's development, and thus kids who were maltreated should be removed immediately and put with strangers. It's fascinating. You can go on this argument all day long. I've seen it work. I've seen kinships work and be wonderful. I've seen kinships blow up just as fast as anything else. You know, I've seen stranger care work, and I've seen stranger care not work. Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the people involved and the kids and the number of supports. And I will tell you throughout this training that if you have a kid, a foster kid in your home, and you sense a developmental issue, call your name tag. Call your foster care person. Or if it's the county, call the county worker. Call somebody. Don't fidget about it. Don't sit there and think, oh, should I do this or not? Blow up their phone. That's what they get paid for, because that might be the best opportunity that kid has to succeed, is by you interceding and you alerting the proper individuals. So after this, we have the lovely developmental domains, eminent domains. So the 4 primary domains are physical, cognitive, social, and emotional. And this is the segue from nature versus nurture. I could talk about that all day, guys. I really could. And it would put all of you to sleep when I see some people fading right now. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, it's fascinating, nature versus nurture. And, you know, it's just sort of frustrates you when you think about it, because here, you know, I've worked with a lot of young people that are very, very intelligent, some very naturally intelligent, but have no drive to do something with that education or do something with that talent, you know. And then I have others who have been groomed that, oh, you're going to be this, you're going to be this, you're going to be this, and they can't do it, you know. I have a lot of young people that think they are super athletes, and while they may have some athletic talent, how much of that is from nurture, from being taught, rather than being naturally, you know, flexible and good with the reflexes and quick. So, developmental domains. The first we have is called physical development. Let's get physical, folks. It's not funny. So, the first area of that is called motor, or the motor activities. So, motor development depends upon muscle strength and coordination. There's 2 types of motor development. And the first is called gross motor, and that means activities such as standing, sitting, walking, and running. And those involve the large muscles of the body, unless you're my sister, and then that involves her jaw muscle. I'm just kidding. It's very robust, though. She's good at talking. Fine motor activities are the second, and those involve speech, vision, the use of hands and fingers, involve the small muscles of the body. Both large and small muscle activities are controlled and coordinated by the central nervous system, the brain. So think about it. Gross motor skills, walking, standing, sitting, running. Anybody here work with a kid? Maybe a younger kid, and they can't walk straight? You know, that could be a developmental issue right there. I knew a kid, no joke, walked on his tippy toes sideways. That's how he got around. And it took years of physical therapy and interventions. But now he runs like a deer. But it took a lot of time and a lot of work because there was a delay in one of the 4 domains. One thing you're going to learn from this training, folks, if there's anything, is that if something goes wrong within one of these 4 domains, they all can be impacted. So just be mindful of that if something goes haywire, say with this physical, the others can also be impacted. There could be delays. So just something to watch out for. And what do you do if you notice something isn't quite right? Call your caseworker. That's right. That's the answer to everything. Call your caseworker. Let them know. Tell them, hey, we need support. So another part of the physical development is called sensory development. Sensory. Wonder what that could be. Maybe the 5 senses. Anybody know what the 5 senses are? Sort of. You there, Madeline.
Eat, smell, taste.
Very good. Vision, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. No ESP. That's a 6th sense. If that's real. Ooh. No. So, hearing, taste, touch, and smell, and vision. These are all sensory, okay? For the most part, they are controlled by your fine motor skills, you know, your eyes, your mouth, things like that, fingers. You know, fine meaning the ones that you need to manipulate this pen. But believe it or not, for a kid with developmental delays, manipulating this pen or this marker can be very, very difficult and maybe frustrating. And after that, maybe rage-inducing. I mean, how many people were ambidextrous in here? Anybody? Write with both hands? Boy, that's a real skill. I can't do it. I can barely write with my right hand. I can only work, my left hand is my dominant hand. And the nuns couldn't beat it out of me. So, but there's a lot of folks that they're right-handed. They can't use their left hand for darn near anything. If my left hand was broken, well, I feel bad whoever has to read my paperwork, because it's going to be hard to read, because this fine motor skill, using these fingers, this hand, is much less developed. So anybody here work with kids that have maybe a vision delay or sensory delays? No? I knew a young lady that thought everything was chicken. Everything was literally chicken. You give her a steak, it was chicken. Gave her a fish stick, it was chicken. If you handed her a bowl of cereal, chicken. Everything was chicken. Why? Because growing up, that's what she was told it was. Oh, that's just chicken. You know, she was denied that basic knowledge, that basic teaching that we think is, you know, we take for granted that parents explain stuff or say, oh, hey, you're not eating chicken, you're eating, you know, pretzel chips or something like that. That's not chicken. You know, or you describe to the kid what they're eating. So others, you know, touch, smell. You know, I've worked with a lot of kids that have delays with their sensory issues, and you know, it can be aggravating to them and to the parent. So what do? If we sense something wrong, we call our caseworker, we get the kids some supports, and we move forward. We help them. Second domain of development is cognitive development, also known as intellectual or mental development. But this book says cognitive is the proper term. Cognitive activities include thinking, perception, memory, reasoning, concept development, problem-solving ability, and abstract thinking. Language, with its requirements of symbolization and memory, is one of the most important and complicated cognitive activities. Now, this is one we see a lot of, I believe, in the foster care pre-adoptive system, is kids with cognitive delays. Now, this doesn't make the kid dumb. Not by any sense of the word. What it means is this kid needs a boost. You know, something has happened, okay? Something has happened early on which has caused the delay here. And I believe that it's our job to help figure that out and get them on the path to getting help and getting this fixed. The problem-solving ability is fascinating to me. You know, when you have a lot of chaos growing up, a lot of times our kids that we see don't have problem-solving abilities. They take a much more basic mentality towards dealing with problems, and that is the fight, flight, or freeze. You know, oh well, you know, Miss Amanda's mad at me. She saw my C in math class, so I'm gonna run away tonight. She's gonna kick me out anyway. You know, or you know, oh I'm starting to feel close to you guys, but I don't know how to say it. So I'm gonna punch a hole in the wall so you hate me, so that I don't have to have these feelings anymore. You know, it seems nuts to us, but at the same time, when you don't have that problem-solving ability, when you're not taught that, it doesn't, you know, you don't have that to fall back on. You know, like if you have a problem, you know, with your cable TV or something, you call the cable company and you politely talk to them. If you don't have problem-solving skills, you're going to call the cable company up and rant and rave like a maniac, and they're going to hang up the phone, and you're going to wonder what in the heck happened. You know, and it happens, but with our kids, that kind of behavior can be off-putting. Same thing with memory. You got a lot of, what? I don't know. Some issues with reasoning. Geez, if I do X, Y, and Z, there's no concept of causality. You know, causality is a fascinating thing. If I put my hand on the hot burner after mom made soup, I'm going to get burned. You know, there's some kids that don't have that ability to reason or don't think of these things and act on impulsivity, so they put their hand on there and, what happened? Why did my hand burn? It was off. Or, you know, with pets, you know, and I always wanted to chase cats. Cats seem to instinctively know to run away from me. But I have a lot of foster kids that I work with that'll pick a cat up by the fur on its back and carry it around, and that cat's paws, or, you know, and then they get scratched, and they're, why is the cat being mean to me? they're not using reasoning. There's no ability to reason there, or they haven't practiced reasoning, and thus they get scratched. The cat has some sort of trauma and probably avoids the kid, you know. And now you have a stressful situation. Oh, do we get rid of the pet? No. You know, you teach the kid differently. So differentiating language and speech is important. Understanding and formulating language is a complex cognitive activity. Speaking, however, is a motor activity. Language and speech are controlled by different parts of the brain. Anybody know that before today? I did not, so I learned something. You know, how many people here have worked with somebody or worked with a kid that has a real hard time communicating? How quickly can that kid get frustrated when they're trying to tell you what's going on and they can't say it? What happens?
They break down.
They break down, that's right. Imagine having a stomach ache and you can't formulate the words or assemble the words or assemble the thoughts to express that your stomach hurts. So how do you get your point across? Anyone? Yell, scream, throw things, lay there on the ground and give up. Right? You know, I think it would be a terrifying thing to not be able to speak or not be able to put words to how I'm feeling. But there's a lot of kids that we will have that cannot do that. And that doesn't make them dumb, it doesn't make them bad people, it means we need to get them support. And I'll tell you what, I've seen speech therapists, you know, different kind of language services do wonders with kids. You know, I had 2-year-old twins that I worked with that went from not being able to really speak sensibly to, they took them to this Chinese buffet on the Trobe, and the girls would sit and pay attention to the language, and next thing you know, they're walking around the house speaking Chinese. And the waitresses were like, this is great, because the girls would come in and say, oh, ni hao, you know, to the waitresses, and they would speak back and forth in Chinese to one another, and they're 2 little kids. So just remember, there's services out there. And keep in mind, observe your kid, get to know them. If you see that they can't express their emotions, you know, be prepared. It might be rough, you know. Some kids can't say it, maybe they can write it. Maybe. But as the foster parent, you're the first line of defense. You are the front lines to this because, let's face it, us name tags, caseworkers, county workers, you know, the courts, we don't know all this stuff all the time. Sometimes you get a kid, you have no information on them. So that's the cognitive development. Remember, it's the reasoning, the memory, perception, you know, how we view things, thinking, problem solving, and abstract thinking. You know, some kids, I kid you not, when it comes to abstract thinking and thinking ahead, I've had kids that had delays that they couldn't see themselves living past 18. Why? Why would you die? Well, I don't know. What am I supposed to do after I turn it? I don't see any future. You know? So, social development is the third domain of development. And that includes the child's interactions with other people and the child's involvement in social groups. The earliest social task is attachment. Anybody know who the kid's longest lasting attachment is? Mom. Yeah. And a lot of kids are fiercely loyal to their mother. The development of relationship with adults and peers, the assumption of a moral system, and eventually assuming a productive role in society are all social tasks. And social development is fascinating with me. It really is. I mean, I just, you know, you watch kids develop, you watch kids grow up, and you can see who excels socially and who struggles. And you know, you think of the poor kid that can't express that they have a stomach ache, and now they're in a classroom full of other kids. They get called on by the teacher when they can't put those words together and they flip out. What do the other kids think? Oh, there's something wrong with him. Oh, he's weirdo. Or they think, oh boy, we're going to have fun with this one. It's going to be an exciting 8 to 10 years of this kid. So, you know, that's why we get services and interventions in place. You know, the social development is impacted, I believe, greatly by the cognitive development, and even by some physical development. If your kid can't play with the other kids, if they have to sit on the bench due to a physical complication or something, they don't get that social interaction, which could cause some issues in the future. The fourth is emotional development, and that includes the development of personal traits and characteristics, including but not limited to a personal identity, self-esteem, the ability to enter into reciprocal emotional relationships, and mood and affect, feelings and emotions that are appropriate for one's age and per situation. And I'll tell you now, this is one that I see a lot of, is kids with emotional delays. Anybody here ever worked with an 18-year-old that falls on the ground and takes a tantrum? You ever see a 5-year-old that tries to parent you? Yeah. That's disturbing to me, the younger ones. I don't care so much about the teenager throwing himself on the ground and flopping around and taking a tantrum because he's mad that I didn't buy him Yu-Gi-Oh cards. What I am worried about is why that 5-year-old feels the need to try to parent me. Why that 8-year-old is, telling me what to pack for my lunch, and is insistent that I eat this and this and this. Or, another one that you may or may not come across, the kid that equates sex with love. That if I have sex with XYZ, they're going to give me the love that I need. And sadly, a lot of our kids fall into that trap where they'll meet somebody, and instantly in love. I met this guy today and he's the one. I met this girl on the bus, I'm marrying her, and then 2 days later, that person's the worst person on the face of the earth. They screwed me over, they're out to get me, blah, blah, blah. It's because of this emotional delay, emotional developmental delay. Self-esteem. Sometimes kids we see and care might come across as cocky, tough, thick-skinned. Then they cry themselves to sleep at night. The working in the group home setting, I can tell you it happened more often than not, where I would have some kid be tough during the day, and we'd hit lights out and they're laying in bed and you hear sniffling and sobbing. Because that cockiness ends after lights out. You're no longer so tough, you're by yourself. And that self-esteem, like, oh, I'm the best at this, I'm the best at that, is just a facade. They have no self-esteem. So what do? We get them as foster kids, we build them up. We build them up, we teach them, we role model how to have and how to build appropriate self-esteem. We help them develop a personal identity, because otherwise they're going to be swayed to be somebody they're not. And believe me, sometimes it's hilarious and sometimes it's not. Sometimes kids fall into gangs. They don't have a strong family, they don't have strong connections, and they're unable to form their own sort of identity. So what do? They run with somebody that does have an identity, even though it's negative. But hey, they feel safe. That's why gangs are scary. Gangs are like families, believe it or not, in some ways. Unhealthy families, but families. They give you that structure and that caring, the fact that somebody is going to look out for you, albeit it's extremely negative, And gangs it's not a new thing. These gangs have been around since, who knows when. So, anybody remember the 4 domains of development?
Physical, cognitive, social, and emotional.
Right there, give that man a cigar. Maybe not, I don't want to get him started on a bad habit. So, now we're going to talk about physical development, birth through age 12. And this one is interesting. I don't work with a lot of babies, so that's why this is sort of fascinating to me. But between birth and 1 month, your kid really starts to grow. 6 to 9 pounds, 18 to 22 inches. You feed them 5 to 8 times a day, and they sleep 20 hours per day. Not unlike a cat, but they're a human. And, they make basic distinctions in hearing, vision, smelling, taste, touch, temperature, and the perception of pain. By 2 to 3 months, we're looking at a 10 to 18 pound kid with a length of 23 to 27 inches, sleeps about 6 hours before waking at night, averages 14 to 17 hours of sleep per day. A lot of visual exploring, their eyes are developing, they're looking around more. So how do we stimulate that, guys? How do we stimulate that development?
Lots to look at.
Lots to look at. Good answer. Lots to look at. Give them stuff. One of those mobiles. I'm not saying go out to the museum or to a fine art store and buy, thousands of dollars worth of paintings to stare at, but, put pictures up. Look at books with them. Oral explorations. Now, this could be tough. Babies want to put everything they see in their mouth. Case in point, my little sister. I remember when she was this age. I was about 6, and she put a bottle cap in her mouth, and I had to fish it out. And my mom walked in on me fishing it out, and she goes, "What was that?" And I said, "This was in her mouth." Thinking, she's going to be in trouble. But no, she didn't get in trouble. She was a baby. But They start to roll over, they sit with some support, and they can grasp a rattle or a finger. Boy, that's cool. I think that's the coolest thing when a baby first does that, grabs a hold. And they don't always want to let go. 4 to 6 months, baby's looking at 14 to 23 pounds. They're starting to drool a little bit. They're starting to mouth things, chewing on objects. Your teeth are starting to form. They take a couple naps a day, need at least 4 feedings per day, which is similar. They roll from back to stomach to back. They purposely grasp objects. So now babies are grabbing stuff on purpose. They're not just flailing about trying to grab at things. Babbling. They make vowels in about half of the sounds of the consonants, and they can distinguish between familiar persons and strangers. I love the babbling. That's a fun thing. This is an important time too when it comes to talking with your baby, talking with that young child, letting them watch your mouth. Believe it or not, watch your mouth develop words, how you speak. And you can see that sometimes with kids that have some speech delays and cognitive delays, they don't know how to form words with their mouth, and they have to learn, later on, which is tough. 7 to 9 months, babies are starting to refuse that bottle during the day. They like to drink from a cup, begin to eat some finger foods, oral exploration still, and they love that peekaboo. And a specific emotional attachment to mother. So, in this age, it's crucial that the mother hold the child, because if she's not holding that baby and she's not forming that bond, that's going to impact that child's ability to form attachments for the rest of their life. So you will see it. Sometimes you hear people joke, "Oh, what, didn't your mother hold you enough as a baby?" You should never say that to anybody, because there are people out there whose mother did not hold them enough as a baby. And they lack that ability to form that trusting relationships. Babies learn from experience, and babies will learn that if I cry, if I scream and screech and wail, and nobody comes and responds to it, over time, they stop doing it. I'm not going to tell you to watch this video, but there are videos from Romanian orphanages that are the most disturbing videos you will ever see. Dozens of babies silent. Why? Because their cries mean nothing. I can cry and cry and cry. Not one of those nurses is going to come and take care of me, so I just lay there. Lay in their own filth. Lay there and be hungry. So 10 to 12 months, they can stack blocks. They like to open and close things. They say 1 or 2 words. They wave bye-bye. And they roll the balls. So it says here, caregiver ideas for birth to 1. The biggest thing you have to do, the number 1 thing it says, is to help infants develop a sense of trust by responding to their cries. Be consistent to help them feel secure. Now, let me ask you guys this. If you feel secure, would you be more inclined to explore? Yeah. So if you don't feel safe, you're going to still feel safe to explore, right? Babies that don't get help, babies that don't develop trust early on, see the world as a dark, frightening, vile place with uncaring people. They see it as a place where they have to be on their guard all the time. A kid that grows up with love and nurturing and support and trust grows up seeing the world as a fascinating place where they can explore and learn and benefit. See the big difference? So one thing you'll learn with the foster kids that you get, or the pre-adoptive kids that you get, is that they lack trust. They don't want to trust you, or they want to trust you too soon. Anybody here get called mom the first day you saw the kid? Oh yeah. I always tell my clients, hey, use the titles when you feel comfortable. Don't feel obliged to do it your first day. But, scheduling is good for babies. They need routine, they need consistency. Provide an environment rich with sound, not terrifying sounds. But, I can remember even as a baby, these dogs up the alley from where I lived, they had a specific kind of bark. And I won't do it for the camera, but this bark, to this day, my parents still comment on it, because I would make that noise with the dogs, And they were scary dogs too. They weren't little chihuahuas. So, stay with the infant when someone new is around. Encourage stranger to approach slowly. My buddy's daughter, when she was this age, I would come over and visit and hang out with him, when we weren't working. And, his daughter, I remember she would creep around, look at me from around things. Because she knew I was, he's that guy that comes around, he and dad sit there and laugh really loud or yell at each other, but he's not a threat. So eventually she would come by. Now 1 to 1.5 years, 17 to 30 pounds, they creep upstairs, they walk for 20 minutes, they obey limited commands, fear of bath time, repeat words. When I say repeat words, I used to have a kid that we played the what's this game. And it go real quick. I remember in the break room at our office, he opened up the drawer, there was a bottle of ketchup. What's this? Ketchup. What's this? Ketchup. What's this? Ketchup. What's that? Mayonnaise. What's this? It's ketchup. Dude, what are you doing to me? This is what he was doing though. He was learning, and he was having fun with it, repeating his words, He liked it. He was one where unfortunately, again, think before you interact. So I used to take handfuls of dirt and I would pretend to eat them. Like hop, 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 hop. And I'd throw it down my back, right? No harm in that. Till the kid picks up a big handful of dirt and throws it in his mouth and then starts spitting it. Now, his mother happened to be a teenage mom, and she came and she let me know about myself for quite a long time. And I swore at that point that no more of that stuff, He never ate dirt again, but I never did my dirt activity. So caregiver ideas for 1 to 1.5 years. Enjoy that floor time with little kids. Encourage safe play with a mirror. Talk, make funny faces. Relax and have fun dancing to music. Oh, we used to dance. Used to blast polkas for my buddy's daughter and jump around. And talk frequently with children to increase language skills. Your 1 to 2 year olds, they need less nap. They like to toss or roll balls. Bends over to pick up toys without falling. Walk up the steps, take steps backwards. Begin to gain some control of bowels and bladder. That's huge. That's power. People don't realize that, but being able to control one's bowels and bladder is a lot of power. And there's sometimes when kids get older and they feel out of control, that they're like, hey, that's one thing I can't control. And they might use it against you. So 2 to 3 years, crayons, coloring, they can differentiate facial expressions of sorrow, anger, and joy if they're taught that by the parents. You see what I'm saying? If they're not taught that, if they're not shown that, what happens? I'm looking at you like this. And a kid might think you're happy. They don't understand. Why are you yelling at me and looking like that? You should be happy. Well, no, I'm angry or, looking sad. They're possessive of toys at 2 and 3 years. Definitely. Ran at that with Legos before. And they have a fear of separation. As much as kids like to wander around. 3 to 4 years, they can use the toilet with some help. Boys sometimes later than girls. Can hop on 1 foot, pedals a trike, can brush teeth, wash hands, and get a drink. But they also begin to identify with the parent of the same sex. So that's when you see little boys starting to drift from mom and drift closer to dad. Same thing with little girls. You see them drifting away from dad and going more towards mom. So, and I think that's frustrating. I know that caused some headaches for my buddy with his daughter, because she would start to rebel against him a little more. And, he'd say, pick up your toys, and she'd go over to the toy box, start ripping them out. He's like, oh. And they'd have stare downs, and it was like, okay, now I've known him for years. How's she going to handle this? And she'd just stare him right down. It was funny for me, and then I'd get yelled at for laughing. But that's a little kids for you. 4 to 5, you're going to learn to throw the ball overhead, able to dress. You might start losing baby teeth. Anybody ever have fun with that, baby teeth? No? Yes? People still do the tooth fairy thing? Every one of my kids came up to me one time, he had $1. He goes, look at the tooth fairy left for me. I said, boy, you got lucky. I said, I ended up getting a bill from the tooth fairy. Oh, come on, that's my best stuff. I'm just kidding. So, 4 to 5 years, they might, left hand or right hand dominance is established, left here. Walking downstairs, alternating feet without that handrail. Hey mom, look what I can do. You know, interest in performing tricks like standing on head, performing dance steps. I remember at 5 years old, I fell forward tried to climb up a slide, ended up busting out some of my teeth, my baby teeth. And it was bad. My grandpa was a World War II vet. He said he'd never seen so much blood in his life, you know. But I learned, I didn't do that again. Tie shoelaces at this age, 4 to 5. So what do you do for caregivers? You help kids identify their feelings by saying, I can see that you are sad because. I can see that you are happy because. Teach freeze and it tag games. Help them develop. I've never heard of this. Help provide a plastic needle, beads, and thread for small motor skills. I think Legos take good care of that. Building with Legos, picking up sticks, things like that. 6 to 8, using scissors at school. Enjoy testing muscles, good sense of balance, catch small balls, can tie shoes, can print name. All those, that's when I started taking different lessons. Longer arms and legs may give gawky appearance or awkward appearance. And then 9 to 12, girls are generally as much as 2 years ahead of boy in physical maturity. Girls may begin to menstruate, increase in body strength and hand dexterity, and improved coordination and reaction time. So kids are getting up to snuff. They're getting up to the point where they're no longer little kids and have to be closely monitored and taught, but it's still time. There's a lot of teaching that goes on. Following this, we have language development, birth through age 5, and this is where, the reaction to an action. So, receptive language, a baby will startle in response to a loud noise. They will smile in response to a familiar voice. Oh, here comes mom with my bottle. I'm going to be happy, And how's the baby going to express it? They're going to make maybe some throaty sounds, some gurgling, cooing. Now that's 0 to 3. 3 to 6 months, babies show fear of angry voices. So if dad's yelling at you or mom's yelling or somebody's yelling on TV, they might get scared. For their expressive language. Oh, big one for 3 to 6 months. They're also going to turn heads towards the sound and human voice, and they're going to respond to their name. So if you have a kid 3 to 6 months that they're not responding to their name, it might be an issue. So what do?
Call the badge.
Call the name tag. You got it. Yeah, this guy's 2 for 2. He's all right. Everybody else. We're going to have to talk after class. No, I'm just kidding. So, 6 to 9 months, looks for family members when asked, where's mommy or daddy? They might imitate familiar gestures. They might use 2-syllable babbling, mama, daddy. They might look at some common object when named. Hey, box, cup, cat, garbage can. Remember, the receptive language is a reaction to it. Action is the expressive language. So, receptive language, 9 to 12 months, they might understand simple requests. Give me a kiss, open your mouth. Understand simple, overlearned words such as hot. Oh, you're so big. Responds to simple questions with searching movements. Where's your shoe? And then the expressive language, they might play exchange games with the adults. So handing things back and forth. Here, this is for you. And then they give it right back. Imitates games of pat a cake and peekaboo. They use jargon, strings a wide variety of vowel consonant sounds together with changes in tone and pitch. Baby talk, guys. Yeah. And they attempt to imitate new words. 12 to 18 months. Are we seeing where this is going, guys? Are we seeing where this language development is headed at this point? As this baby is growing, their receptive language, the language they're reacting to is increasing, and their expressive language is increasing, and it all comes down to how much time the parents are investing or the caregivers are investing in working with this kid. Now, if you have a kid that sits in a dark room in a playpen all day long, there's nobody talking to them, how's their language development going to be? No, we're going to have major developmental issues there, and it happens. Sad to say that kind of stuff happens out there. People ill-equipped to parent, people that maybe have mental health or drug and alcohol issues. They don't know what to do with the kids, so they put them in a room. Shut the door. Hey, just sitting there, you won't get hurt. So, 18 to 24 months, they answer. understand simple yes or no. They make animal sounds, maybe when they're playing. You know, they use no frequently. Oh man, that 18-month-old that I worked with, that did the, what's this, what's this, what's this? He did this no game. And it got old within the first day. And his poor mother, who was all of 17, she had to deal with this all day. But he would go, I said, how are you doing today? No! Okay. What's new? No! And then I started to have fun with it. Hey, are the Pirates going to win this year? No! Are the Steelers? No! Penguins? No! You know, he would just scream no to anything. I'd look at him like, hamburger? No! It was a word he was very good at it. They also use my to declare ownership. That's my doggy, or it's my chair. 24 to 36 months, they understand actions and pictures. They usually use 2 to 4 word combinations. They might repeat 2 numbers in sequence, or, you know, understand question forms who, where, what, doing. They also understand genders and like to listen to short stories. Tell me a story. Let me read you a bedtime story. 36 to 48 months, asks many who, when, why. You know, understands question forms. What do you do when you're hungry? Sleepy, cold. So, okay, you have a 36-month-old kid, you have a 3-year-old kid to a 4-year-old kid, and they're hungry, and they have a cognitive delay, and they're hungry, and they can't tell you they're hungry. So how are they going to handle that? Throw a fit. Oh man, this is the power couple up front. Yeah, they're going to flip out, and you're going to be like, oh my God, what is wrong with this kid? Why are they flipping out like this? Well, never been taught. They've never been taught. Remember, you know, if there's not that trusting relationship with an adult, and the adults aren't role modeling for them, this speaking and working with them, they're not going to be able to communicate. And then you play the guessing game. 36 to 48 again, you know, complete simple verbal opposites. So daddy is a boy, mommy is a girl. They might imitate whispering poorly. I never got too good at whispering myself. I'm always good at the stage whisper. I saw that look back there. Yeah. So 48 to 60 months, I identify 2 to 3 colors. Might understand concepts such as heavy versus light, loud versus soft. They can ask all sorts of questions, and then at 5 years plus, they could retell a story. You know, they understand more about spatial concepts, left and right. Identify all the primary colors, and they may distort or substitute for speech sounds S, Z, R, and TH, and consonant blends P, L, T, R, S, P, etc. I don't know what that means. So here we have school-age children development. Now, a lot of the kids we see, you don't see a whole ton of babies and younger kids in foster care. You know, if you see that in kinship, but not as much with the regular foster care. Now, kids 6 to 12, you do see more of. Okay, so physical development for a school-age child. You know, school-age children from 6 to 12, the sense of body begins developing around the age of 6. Sedentary habits in school-age children are linked to a risk for obesity and a risk for heart disease in adults. Children in this age group should get at least 1 hour of physical activity per day. Well, I see the way they run around, you know, but not all kids get that. If you're, like I said, if you're locked in a bedroom and you're not allowed to go outside, what's going to happen? You're going to sit there, you know, and then, you know, you gain weight, you feel bad. You know, more about the 6 to 12, fine motor skills, they might vary widely. These skills can affect the child's ability to write neatly, dress appropriately, and perform certain chores such as making bed or doing dishes. There can also be a big difference in the age at which kids develop secondary sexual characteristics. For girls, these mean breast development and underarm and pubic hair growth. And for boys, you know, growth of underarm, chest, and pubic hair, and growth of testicles and penis. And this is an age where kids will explore. Okay, they will explore and they will ask questions. And, you know, I think the best thing to use that as a moment to teach. You know, I would say avoid shaming. Oh, don't talk about that. That's filthy. Now, if a kid's asking you in the middle of Walmart something about hair development in their body, maybe we'll talk about that when we get home. But shaming at this point, saying something like, "Oh, we don't speak of those things," could really, lead to an issue with the kid later on. So, by age 5, most children are ready to start learning in school setting. The first few years focus on the fundamentals. By 3rd grade, the focus becomes more complex. Reading becomes more about the content, then identifying letters and words. Now, for a kid to learn, it's important for a kid to learn how to deal with failure or frustration without losing self-esteem. There are many causes of school failure, including learning disabilities, such as a reading disability, bullying, or other stressors, or mental health issues. And this is one where you get to know the teacher. I have a 7-year-old, I'm working with a 7-year-old, and his foster mother, daily communication with the teacher. And she has to, because if, this kid comes home from school, how was school? Good. Well, was it good? Yeah. Meanwhile, he's got numerous checks on his paper because maybe he wasn't so good at school. But, because the teacher forewarns her, she knows what to deal with. Behavior in school age kids, you get a lot of complaints about sore throats, tummy aches, arm pain. Might be due to increased awareness, or, might just be, wanting some attention. How many people have kids that have mystery ailments, right? My stomach hurts. From what? I don't know. Well, did it have anything to do with all that chocolate you ate? Maybe, So, and we've all been there. We've all been, kids before where, maybe you didn't want to go to church, so all of a sudden you're feeling queasy. Oh man, my stomach hurts so bad, I can't make it out. Or, oh, I've got this headache, or my arm hurts. Lying, cheating, and stealing are all examples of behaviors that school-age children may try on as they learn how to negotiate the expectations and rules placed on them by family, friends, school, and society. Parents should deal with these behaviors in private with their children so their friends don't tease them. Parents should show forgiveness and punish in a way that is related to the behavior. And I don't condone it when little kids tell lies, or they cheat, or they steal, or they do something, they try to pull one over on you. But at the same time, how much of that is development versus just being, having a deviant behavior? How many people made up stories as a kid? I did, I'll admit it, How many people maybe cheated at baseball or basketball, or accused somebody else of cheating when they knew they didn't? Or, maybe borrowed somebody's video game or baseball glove for too long and maybe forgot to give it back to them. Does it make it deviant? No, but it needs to be dealt with by the parent. And it's important for kids how to learn how to deal with failure. How many people in here believe kids should just be allowed to fail sometimes? I always have. And I've failed at things, And one thing I've learned over life is how much effort I put into it is how much of a result I'm going to get out of it. I entered into a piano contest once. I didn't practice for months. Started practicing the week of. Got up on stage and realized, oh crap, there's people watching, and my hands froze. I didn't win. I was mad at the world. But you know what? At the end of the day, whose fault was it? It was my fault. And I had to own that failure. But by owning the failure, I was able to grow from it and learn I got to put more preparation into things if I'm going to win. If you look at kids and your kid is like, oh mom, I lost at the science fair, and you're like, well, we're going to go down to that school and we're going to file a complaint, and what's that kid going to learn? That every time I lose, I have to file a complaint or a grievance, or well, Johnny was supposed to build a kite, but instead he drew a picture of a dog. That's why he was disqualified. Yeah, but that's the best dog you ever saw. Well, what's the dog have to do with anything? See what I'm saying? Let them fail sometimes. Safety for younger kids, again, knee pads and all that good stuff, though, sometimes falling down and getting bruised and getting back up, is important. Of course, with foster kids, though, you have to be careful. Be absolutely careful, because sometimes bruises can be suspected by somebody well-meaning, to be interpreted as, oh, well, is that kid being abused? Is that kid being hurt? So, definitely try to use, some equipment that's appropriate, even if the kid screams and yells. Same thing with swimming lessons, safety instruction regarding matches, lighters, barbecues, stoves. I wouldn't. That is all determined on how much you trust the kid. I know for a fact I wasn't allowed to touch the stove till I was like 16, so 15. I tried before, but it went badly. And seatbelts. Again, it has all these parent tips. I would say with the new acts such as prudent parenting and common sense, you guys should have a good idea as to what to do and what not to do. It says in here, if a language skill appears to be lacking, request a speech and language evaluation. No, you go to your foster care caseworker and in private say, this kid's having a really hard time communicating. What can we do? Encourage kids to participate in a variety of social and physical experiences. Be careful not to overschedule free time. Not free play or simple quiet time is important so the kid does not always feel the need to perform. It drives me nuts. I do a service called child preparation, and I'll have kids in 6 different after school activities that they don't get home till 10 o'clock at night, and then they got to do homework, shower, eat dinner. What the heck kind of life is that? That's rough. That's rough on everybody. I say maybe 1 or 2 activities, like sports. Anybody here have kids in sports or coach a sport? My goodness. Till 7, 8 o'clock at night? Really? When do you do homework? Oh, I didn't get any homework. No, I never buy that excuse because I wrote that one. I didn't get any homework.
What about family time?
Family time. Schedule that in.
I have struggles with families that are every which way, and then it is late at night, and then we've got 2 different activities on the weekends and this and that, and I'm like, maybe I just have a skewed vision of what family is supposed to be about. But if we're always separate because we're entertaining the kids in 5 different activities.
Well, that's where you set up the boundaries and the limits and expectations. That's where you say, well, have certain non-negotiables. I, for one, as a service provider, Fridays, I will not do afternoons anywhere. I'm like, you know what? No. If the kids don't have anything Friday night, they're certainly not going to meet with me because you guys need to spend family time. Same thing with the weekends, unless it's like a crisis. During the week, I don't like to visit with families after 6. I really don't, unless they're very local, or they've annoyed me. No, I'm just kidding. You guys are all right back then. Because I believe that kids and families should have time to bond. Sit down and eat a meal together. Watch a program together. Get yelled at for that stunt you pulled on the bus. Like something. Do something together that doesn't involve having to drive to practice. So I put it up to the parent.
That's what with cell phones today.
Oh yeah.
Too much of this goes on when you are home in your spare time. People really is.
I
Can't talk to each other, can't communicate. It's like,
The cell phone has taken away from a lot of good family bonding time. I'll admit to that too. And I'll tell you now, some of the most successful families I've seen have those things turned in. That's usually the first thing that goes and the first thing that gets checked in, like, hey, put your phone away. Even as a service provider, when I go to private houses, I have to tell kids sometimes, hey, put the phone away. The drama on Facebook will be there when we're done. It'll probably be pretty juicy by that point. So, yeah, that's a good point. Set the expectations. Be the parent. Set the expectation. Hey.
I just think about it like they get to use critical thinking skills too if they're not always looking at a phone or electronics or every which way, because then you think about growing up and being an adult and having to work, and then you want them to be successful adults, and if they have to be entertained 24/7, then we're going to have some.
You're going to be an issue.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
We're going to have some serious issues for the workforce.
And I'll tell you now, it's the reality, and that's why. Even problem-solving skills. I had one former client and a current client get into a fight at their school, and they both knew they worked with me. So I went after school, picked the one up, took him down to his mortal enemy's house, and I said, okay, we're going to work this out. We're going to talk it out. And it all stemmed from stupidity. One called the other a name, the other one insulted the other one's mom. And I said, well, do you know his mother? No. Okay, then why are you talking about him? Well, I don't know. Is he what you called him? I don't know. Then why would you accuse him of that? And I'm like, really, guys? What are you fighting over? Nothing. I said, why don't we talk it out? Problem-solving skills. Because the plan was to avoid each other and then slam each other on Facebook.
That's some new stuff I hate.
Yep, and would that have made it any better? Hey, I'm going to slam you on Facebook. Heck no. But again, these were both kids that didn't grow up learning problem-solving skills, that had to learn it from a 6-month service provider, And that says something. That says, how did you deal? I always ask kids, how do you deal with problems at home? School age kids, how did your mom and dad resolve problems? Oh, they would just go on Facebook, or oh, they would just call a friend, or oh, they would just go smoke, or X, Y, Z, or they would just leave for an extended period of time. I said, well, is there any resolution? No. So adolescent development, see a lot of adolescents in the foster care system, sadly. A lot of teens, tweens. I love it. Those are my people. I tend to work with older kids. If you give me a younger kid, I enjoy working with them too, but I like my 16, 17, 18-year-olds. It's fun for me, because you can get more stuff accomplished. They're more aware of things, but this adolescent age is important because, puberty is a reality. Kids are going to start developing an identity, and that can lead to a whole slew of new conversations. How many people here have had an adolescent foster kid in their home and the kids told others that they're in foster care? Yeah, I've had that go horribly wrong recently. I had one of my kids tell a person they were interested in that they were in foster care, and the kid dumped them on the spot. Said, we're done. You kids move around too much. I'm not getting attached to somebody that's going to leave me. Sorry. So that makes it tough. Same thing with mid to late adolescence. Young people often feel the need to establish their sexual identity. In today's day and culture of more gender fluidity, it does make it more complicated for youth. I've had youth that will claim to be and assert that they are transgender one day, and then the next day they're not, that they were just kidding, and then 2 weeks later you find out that they are, exploring, surgeries or hormone replacements or things like that. And I'll be honest with you, adolescents very often have behaviors that are consistent with the several myths of adolescence. The first myth, that they're always on stage, and the second is that it will never happen to me. Oh, I won't get pregnant. Oh, I won't get hooked on drugs. Oh, I won't get caught. Let me tell you something. You will get caught, it can happen. But it's tricky, and I think this is why I enjoy working with my teens, because sometimes they do have that sense that everything is okay until it's not, right? Everything is hunky-dory until, the caseworker gets involved, or mom and dad, or, sorry about that, or Amanda gets involved and heads roll, right? Well, like your girl, with her, she had all the good intentions in the world when we were at that one place. Everything was going to be great. And then, she gets discharged, and what happens? I miss her for like a whole 3 months. I didn't know where she was at. And now she's in a great place. And this girl went from having major social and, other issues to now she's graduating high school. She's going to be going to college. You'd be amazed what foster care can do, and what families can do to help a kid really heal and move forward. But under behavior for adolescents,
She was a good kid, though.
Oh, yeah.
She wanted that, yeah. That helped a lot.
She craved that structure, and that, and that's, I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of, I'm used to being independent. I'm going to be independent. I'm going to do what I want, But, behavior, like I said, physical changes may not occur in smooth, regular schedule. Therefore, our kids sometimes are awkward. That might lead to some bullying. Ask questions. Ask questions around the dinner table, or on transport to a visit, or, to a doctor's office. You'd be amazed who the bully might be. It might be another kid. It might be the principal of the school making comments. Oh, well, you know how you foster kids are. Had that happen. Not good. So, if during adolescence, don't be surprised if the kid maybe starts to distance themselves from you, or to make their own identity, In some cases, this may occur without a problem from their parents and other family members. However, this may lead to conflict in some families. That could be your kid rebelling by coloring their hair green, which I guess isn't unusual nowadays, to color your hair various colors. Blue. The nice young lady at the local McDonald's that I go to has a beautiful blue hair. And I was like, is that natural? Is that running the family? And she didn't see the humor in it, but I sure did. Nobody else did. So, Any other questions about teens or adolescents? There's going to be parenting tips about sexuality. One of my favorites ever about teens and sexuality was one of my boys who was like 17, and he asked his foster dad if he could have his girlfriend stay over one night. And the dad was like, "Are you kidding me?" And the kid's like, "What? We weren't going to do anything." And he's like, "Are you kidding?" And this kid thought it was a genuinely good request. Hey, can I have my girlfriend stay over? But a big thing about teens and adolescents is, they need their privacy to understand the changes taking place in their bodies. I will tell you now that some kids handle it better than others. I had a young woman that had her first experience of menstrual cycle, and it did not go well for her, and she did not know how to communicate it to the foster parent, and it actually led to a much, much, much bigger issue, which is now under control, but it was terrifying for her because she couldn't put it into words. She couldn't ask the adults for help because in her home, she was the caregiver. How does the caregiver ask for help? You see what I'm saying, guys? So what do? We ask questions, Adolescents may experiment with a wide range of sexual orientations or behaviors before feeling comfortable with their own identity. Parents must be careful not to call new behaviors wrong, sick, or immoral. I think it leads to conversations in private, not in front of all the other kids, the community. Your 97-year-old great aunt that may or may not speak great English. I would do it alone with the kid, or with my other parent, with my spouse, or even with a caseworker. Hey, if the kid is exhibiting inappropriate or unhealthy sexual behaviors, give your name tag a call. Say, hey, this kid, I'm finding evidence of this, and I'm finding evidence of this, and, let us help you. Let us be a support. Before you call that county or your worker and say, get this kid the heck out of my house, give one of us a ring. Let us back you up, Ask any of the families that work with me. I have no problem asking tough questions, It's part of the job. The Oedipal complex, a child's attraction to the parent of the opposite sex, is common during the adolescent years. One thing we have to be mindful of is crossing parent-child boundaries, just making it aware that, okay, well, I love you too, but I love you as a child, as compared to anything else. I've never encountered this one where it says it is normal for the parent to find the adolescent attractive. This often happens because the teen often very much looks like an adult, or like the other same-sex parent did at a younger age. This attraction may cause the parent to feel awkward. I don't know. I've always looked at my clients as kids, even my older clients as kids. I don't care if you're 19, 20. I have 20-year-olds I work with, and I'm like, dude, you're still a kid, So, and then independence and power struggles. Teenagers' quest to become independent is a normal part of development. Parents should not see it as rejection or loss of control. You just need to be constant and consistent. Hey, I know you're going to want to do your thing. I don't exactly agree with it, but when it blows up in your face, I'm here for you. I may not say that last part, but we're here for you. Power struggles begin when authority is at stake and being right is the main issue. And I think we've all been there with power struggles at some point or another with our lives, where the teenager's like, well, I'm going to date so-and-so, and there's nothing you can say about it, or, I'm going to go out and I'm going to stay out to this hour, and there's nothing you can do, or, so instead what do? We work with the kid, we have those boundaries. Parents should be ready for and recognize common conflicts that may develop while parenting adolescents. And that prudent parenting makes life so much easier, that act, when it comes to allowing kids to do stuff, whether it's going to proms or playing sports. I'm going to go to the prom with so-and-so whether you like it or not. It helps allow kids, I guess with the independence and power struggle, you want to try to give the kid as much normalcy as possible and let them know that, there will be phases. Life is not Leave It to Beaver. It's also not The Simpsons or Family Guy, but it's certainly not Leave It to Beaver where everything is perfect. I dare you to find me a perfect home. Dare you, because it's not out there. Parents should know that adolescents will repeatedly challenge their authority, but by keeping open lines of communication and clear yet negotiable limits or boundaries may often help reduce major conflicts, like with who. how do you guys do it with her? Because I mean, she's pretty strong-willed and independent-minded. You know, she wants what she wants it. You know, and there's no substitute.
Still like that.
You know, so I mean, how do you guys do it?
Just keep reminding her who the parent is.
Yeah, keep reminding, you know, hey, you know, we still love you, but we're calling the shots here. You know, when you get your own place and you're older, then you can make decisions. But at this point, you know, because I know she likes life on the wild side sometimes.
She's calmed down a little bit.
That makes me happy.
Little bit. She's still, like you
We
said,
just have to
strong-willed and
Yeah.
strong-minded.
Just
yes.
remind her like, are you the parent? And she knows then to
Yeah.
hush up and walk away.
And it's not even a being mean thing. It's a, you know, setting that boundary, because I think kids deep down appreciate the boundary and the structure, so they know that that adult is there and they care enough to put their foot down. You know, if you were to bend over or backwards and say, you know what, just do what you want, what would happen? Then that boundary and trust is lost, and now you have somebody that's run rampant that is going to leave, and then everybody gets hurt.
You also have to give them a little bit of a freedom to let them make their own
Yeah.
mistakes.
Like you
And
said,
then eventually, I mean, she has came back and said, well, why'd you let me do that?
that's what, yeah, you said that, and I think someone else said it. Kids don't want total freedom. They want structure. You know, they might not let you know that, but and deep down inside, the kids want structure.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're craving it. You know, it shows that you love them, you care about them, they know they need it. You know.
Like he said, you know, a lot of the kids we get in care, teenagers especially, have never had anybody that loved them enough to put their foot down, or didn't have enough people around them that cared enough to put their foot down and say, no, you're not doing that. You're not going out dressed like that, you know, or you're not hanging out with that kid. I don't allow it, you know. And yeah, they might hate you or get mad at you, or, you know, oh, can I get a new foster home? This family, this family sucks. They won't let me do anything. Well, you know, deep down they're thinking, well, dang, you know, what's up with these folks? You know, they're giving a shot, giving me some challenges. You know, I think back to what you said. Why would you let me do that? I think back to the young man I worked with at a group home, and we had cake, and we had baked potatoes with dinner, and there was sour cream on each table, a bowl of it, and he thought it was icing, and he was just lobbing it onto his cake, one scoop after another. And I said to him, dude, sour cream. You just don't want us kids to have sweets, that's all. You just don't want us to have icing. And I said, have at it. Took one bite, spit it out, said, that's gross, that's sour cream. Why would you let me do that? And I said, hey, you had the opportunity, you kept going. Sometimes we have to learn by experience. And that leads us into the stages of development by various psychiatrists, including Jean Piaget and his stages of cognitive development, intellectual or mental development. So he starts it off at birth with sensory motor stage, age birth to 2. Characteristics: infants use senses and motor abilities to understand the world. There is no conceptual or reflective thought. So they're not thinking about it. It's known and it's there, you know, and they know what they can do with it, but they don't really know what it is. They know the ball. If they push it, it comes back. They don't know why. Okay? They just know that it does. Sort of easy. You know, they also learn that an object still exists when it is out of sight, object permanence, and begins to think through mental actions as well as physical actions. That's why peekaboo is so much fun, because they learn that you're still there, you're just hiding. And those of you that like to laugh, go on the internet and see these videos of people holding up blankets in front of dogs and cats and then dropping the blankets and disappearing. Animals do not develop that ability, that object permanence, like humans do. So the dog's like, oh my God, he's gone. Or, you know, there was one where the cat was like, you know, walking around meowing, calling this guy, you know, and then they're shocked when you walk out from around the corner, like, oh, you were there. You know, babies, they learn that at an early age. So second stage, pre-operational, you know, kids use symbolic thinking to think about objects through mental processes, including language, to understand the world. Sometimes the child's thinking is egocentric, wait for it, causing the child to understand the world only from their perspective. It's their world, we're just taking up space in it. That's your 2 to 7-year-old, so says Mr. Piaget. Major acquisitions, imagination flourishes, self-expression. Kids gradually begin to decenter, and that means they become less egocentric and they try to maybe coordinate multiple points of views. I would challenge that one. The concrete operational stage 7 to 11, and this is where kids are applying more logic. They're learning to understand concepts of conservation, number, classification. You know, those are your kids that might arrange their Legos all by color, you know, or their Pokemon cards by type of Pokemon they have instead of just jumbling them all up. And then formal operational 11 to adulthood, they're able to think about abstractions and hypothetical concepts, you know, and their major acquisitions are ethics, politics, and social and moral issues become more interesting and involving as the adolescent becomes able to take a broader and more theoretical approach to experience. Now, where I challenge this one is a lot of my clients who are older don't seem to reach that stage because they're in such a stage of survival. And there might be delays there that prevent this from occurring. So very rarely do I have a kid that sits there in my sessions and says, well, let's talk about gun violence. Let's talk about elections. Let's talk about religion. Let's talk, you know, most of them are like very, very point blank, very black and white. There's no debating anything. And that's interesting to me. So then we have Mr. Eric Erickson. His parents are very creative. Either that or he was Swedish. Fell flat again. Interactions with other people. Psychosocial stages of human development, ladies and gentlemen. First stage, basic trust versus mistrust. Did we not just talk about that? What happens if you don't hold your baby? The baby doesn't develop what? Starts with the T. Trust. Oh, give those folks cigars. So, baby doesn't learn trust. Babies learn either to trust that others will care for their basic needs, including nourishment, warmth, cleanliness, and physical contact, or to lack confidence in the care of others. Trust in infancy sets the stage for a lifelong experience or expectation that the world will be a good and pleasant place to live in. You know, again, if that basic trust isn't taught, isn't shown, what base do you have? It's like building your house out of blocks of sand. And the first time it rains, everything falls out from underneath you. Second stage, according to Mr. Erickson, is autonomy versus shame and doubt, 1 to 3. So kids either learn to be self-sufficient, including toileting, feeding, walking, exploring. If infants are restrained too much or punished too harshly, they are likely to develop that sense of shame and doubt. And those are your kids that hang back, that maybe have been stuck in a room by themselves, stuck in a playing room, they don't have any stimulation. Stage 3, initiative versus guilt, and that's 3 to 6. Kids want to undertake many adult-like activities, developing a sense of responsibility through initiative. Uncomfortable guilt feelings may arise, though, if the kid is irresponsible and is made to feel too anxious. So, case in point, had a young man, he was feeding rabbits. That was his chore, to feed the bunnies. And he was about 7 years old. I remember he was, you know, I always thought he'd be rough with the animals, but one day I snuck up on him. He was tapping on the cage. He goes, bunnies, come on, bunnies, move. I got to feed you, bunnies. Come on, you got to move away from the door. And he was so patient tapping at this door because he didn't want to scare them. He just wanted it to move. And he was so gentle about it. He put the food in, he checked the water, and then, you know, he petted each of the bunnies nice and softly, and then he closed the door. I said, boy, you were really good at that. And he looked at me and said, I want to be a veterinarian when I grow up. Veterinarian. That's initiative versus guilt. You know, he took the initiative. He was doing it. Industry versus inferiority. Kids either learn to be competent and productive and mastering new skills, or they feel inferior and don't bother. You know, and that I think goes more with, you know, parents encouraging the kids, but also allowing them to fail, but helping them. You know, helping them learn, helping them move forward. And the 5th stage is identity versus confusion, 12 to 19. Adolescents try to figure out who am I. They establish sexual, political, and career identities. If an identity is pushed on the adolescent by parents, that could be an issue. There could be rebellion, there could be identity confusion, a lot of issues. And then the last one is Dr. Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. So the first is pre-conventional, and that's the emphasis on getting rewards and avoiding punishments, which is mostly my life. Morals, good versus bad. So might makes right, punishment and obedience, orientation. This is for your little kids, you know. The most important value is obedience to authority in order to avoid the punishment. So I'm going to put away my clothes not because I want to, but because if I don't, mom's going to yell at me. And I don't want that. Stage 2 is looking out for number 1. So each person tries to take care of his own needs. The reason to be nice to someone is so that they'll be nice to you. It's level 2, conventional, and that's the emphasis on the social rules. The good girl, nice boy. Good behavior is considered behavior that pleases other people and wins their praise. Approval is more important than any specific reward. So just by people saying, oh, he's a good kid, that's enough. You're not getting a reward, but you're being seen as good. The 4th stage of that is what's called law and order. Right behavior means being a dutiful citizen and obeying the laws set down in society. And then level 3, post-conventional, emphasis on moral principles. Stage 5, social contract. One should obey the rules of society because they exist for the benefit of all and are established by mutual agreement. Now, I will tell you what, for a lot of the kids that I get in care and that I work with, I believe a lot of them don't hit post-conventional. They don't see rules and laws as helpful. Maybe they have parents that instill that in them. Hate the police, mistrust the cops, mistrust CYS, don't trust your caseworker. Don't tell him about what went on in the house, So how do you develop an understanding of a social contract, if you aren't taught that, if you aren't given an opportunity to learn that? If you're taught to mistrust other people or people in authority. Don't talk to your teachers about what goes on in the house. They don't need to know that. Well, yeah, you don't want to let them know that mom cut her finger and said a bad word while she's making meatloaf. But if you're getting beat or abused and they're saying, well, don't you dare tell CYS, that's pretty bad. And then universal ethical principles. All life is sacred. General universal principles determine right and wrong. And this comes to individual reflection and other kind of developmental skills. And that's the tough one too, this post-conventional. Like I said, this doesn't work for every single person. These work just as a generalized stage of moral development. So then finally, we're coming down to how abuse and neglect affect development. So, with babies, shaken baby, abuse, hitting, blows to the head, they can cause brain damage. Neglect, malnutrition, medical neglect can cause growth issues and permanent physical disability. Lack of stimulation causes poor muscle tone, poor motor skill, motor control. Social failure to form top attachments. They may go with anybody. If they don't see the value and trust in relationships with mom, that kid might wander off with some stranger at Walmart and feel just as safe with them as they do with you. Why? Because they don't know. Because they're not forming attachments. It's just another grown-up to walk with. And that's scary. I see it all the time at Walmart. The little kid wanders off, falling around a stranger, and you wonder, what in the heck's that kid doing? So, emotional, how neglect and abuse affects that. They fail to develop trust. Which impairs the ability to develop healthy relationships. Kids might view themselves as bad or no good. Preschool kids, a lot of the same stuff, very fearful, easily traumatized, relationships are superficial, may not attach to others easily, show no emotions, or socially immature with peers, play at a younger level. And that could be the kid that doesn't share, the kid that's quick to hit, the kid that just doesn't get the social norms, that maybe doesn't know when enough is enough, so we have to intervene. School age kids, the effective neglect and abuse, the general physical delays, and they might appear younger. Thinking is typical of a younger child, maybe some baby talk. They're definitely mistrustful of adults, and they like to play the parent role with siblings, difficulty making friends, and unrealistic about family. And these are the ones that I find are extremely loyal to the parents who were never so loyal to them. And it's just mind-blowing to me. How can you be so attached to somebody who's hurt you so much? But it's because they have unrealistic ideas about what family is and who their family is. And then low self-esteem, unable to delay gratification. Anybody know what that means, delayed gratification? It means to wait, basically. Instead of eating the Kit Kat as soon as you're, given it, maybe save it for dessert or something along those lines. Say you get $10 for cutting the grass, rather than spending it on junk, maybe you save it towards something else. unable to cope with stress, might be anxious or depressed, maybe bossy, aggressive, and or destructive, and they might feel helpless and out of control. And for adolescents, neglect and abuse, sickly, chronic illness, puberty might be affected due to the lack of good nutrition and health care, things like that. Malnutrition can certainly affect puberty. Thinking on a younger level, they might be academically delayed, may demonstrate poor school performance, social difficulty maintaining relationships with peers, socially withdrawn, dependent on peers, mistrustful adults, difficulty in sexual relationships, believe love, sex equals love. That's the one that scares me because it leads a lot of kids towards exploitation. Sex trafficking, and it's a reality even in our wonderful southwestern corner of the Commonwealth, folks. It's out there and it's bad. And then emotional, they display variety of emotional and behavioral problems: anxiety, depression, aggression. You might have a bully on your hands, inability to cope with intense emotions, mood swings, poor self-image, numerous hospitalizations due to feeling out of control or suicidal. May not be able to plan for the future, but they'll verbalize unrealistic goals for self. And I've worked with a lot of adolescents that have these delays and have been abused. And I'll tell you, a lot of my young men, they're going to be the next NFL superstar, or they're going to be the next big performing. I had a kid tell me he was going to be the next big country singer, and when he sang, I had nothing against him. He had a unique sound. Whether or not people would pay to hear that sound, that's a little different, but he didn't understand that because his views were skewed, So finally, this takes us to early intervention services for children under age 3 in Pennsylvania. And basically, children from birth to age 3 are eligible for early intervention. EI services if they have a developmental delay or a physical or mental disability such as Down syndrome that is likely to result in a developmental delay. If you suspect, or the doctor suspects, or whoever suspects that this kid, your kid, has one of these delays, I would right away just jump on it and try to get services involved. I would definitely talk to my caseworker or the personal care physician and bring that up to them, that, hey, I think we need to get some services. This is where you really have to be an advocate for your kid, because you are, again, foster parents are the front lines. They see it. They see the good, the bad, the scary, the confusing, and thus it's important that you let us know what's going on. So yes, there's a lot of early intervention programs out there. I've seen them; they work. I've watched them work. These people come in with a certain set of skills, like that movie says. I have a certain set of skills. I forget what it was called anyway. Any questions about early intervention or child development or anything along those lines? No? You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for being foster parents and for being on the front lines and being there for our kids. All right?
And call your caseworker.
Call your caseworker.